Hello and welcome to the Exalted March, where we talk about Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and BioWare games in general, and where today we're going to be doing a commentary on In Hushed Whispers. This is really more of a retrospect and a commentary. It's not a Let's Play. I'm actually recording this commentary after having played this section on my most recent playthrough. And so I wanted to take a moment just to comment on the themes and the particular moments of relevance within the story of this quest. I think it's some of the best work that BioWare has ever done. It's not just one of my favorite quests within Dragon Age, it's really one of my favorite quests in any BioWare game ever. So this is really for those who want to go ahead and watch this storyline take place again, who want to enjoy the particular quest without having to play it over again, personally. And also getting the benefit of having short bits of commentary interspersed throughout to add some depth and meaning to the story. It's also great if you haven't played Dragon Age and you want to get a taste of some of the best moments with someone to cue you in on key themes, characters, and plot elements of the series so you can fully grasp what's happening. I'll be doing another one of these with In Your Heart Shall Burn, which is another climactic quest and one of my favorites. And if anyone has any requests on further quests that I should play and do commentaries on, or any questions on mods that are being used in this video, please let me know in the comments down below.
Welcome, agents of the Inquisition. What has brought you to Redcliffe?
We're here because of your invitation back in Val Royeaux.
You must be mistaken. I haven't been to Val Royeaux since before the Conclave.
Well, that's very strange, because someone who looked exactly like you spoke to me in Val Royeaux.
Exactly like me? I suppose it could be magic at work, but why would anyone... Whoever or whatever brought you here? The situation has changed. The free mages have already pledged themselves to the service of the Tevinter Imperium.
I understand that you are afraid, but you deserve better than slavery to Tevinter.
As one indentured to a magister, I no longer have the authority to negotiate with you.
This is a really interesting moment for fans of the series who are familiar with Fiona from the novels, in that she is a very strong-willed character within the novels. She's really someone who self-determines, even in the face of royalty or other established power structures within the world of Thetis.
I needed to save as many of my people as I could.
So to see her in this position is, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's out of character, but it's definitely surprising to see her acquiesce so easily to the Tevinter Magisters.
Allow me to introduce Magister Alexius.
The Southern Mages are under my command. And you are the survivor, yes? The one from the Fade? Interesting.
I haven't seen any sign of Redcliffe's Arl or his men.
The Arl of Redcliffe left the village.
Left? An Arl would never voluntarily leave his seat.
There were tensions growing. I did not want an incident.
I'd like to know more about this alliance between the rebel mages and the Imperium.
Certainly. What specifically do you wish to know?
The Grand Enchanter told me she was indentured to a Magister.
Our Southern brethren have no legal status in the Imperium. As they were not born citizens of Tevinter, they must work for a period of 10 years.
So as most people familiar with the franchise know, that slavery or indentured servitude is common in the Tevinter Imperium. And it seems Fiona and the mages have gotten themselves wrapped up into that sort of quote-unquote agreement.
I'm not clear on when exactly you negotiated this arrangement with Fiona.
When the Conclave was destroyed, these poor souls faced the brutality of the Templars, who rushed to attack them. It could only be through divine providence that I arrived when I did.
It was certainly very timely.
Again, I've always suspected, and although it's never clearly stated, I've always suspected that perhaps there was some sort of magical influence that affected Fiona's decision-making, because the level of cooperation that she gives to the Tevinters is really unusual, particularly if you see the way she's portrayed in some of the novels.
Please. Pardon my manners. My son Felix, friends. I'm not surprised you're here. In
particular, that last answer where she hesitates, it almost seems that she's either very, very afraid or in some way not herself.
Ambitious indeed.
Well, when you're fighting a massive tear in the sky, you can hardly afford to think small.
There will have to be. Felix.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive my clumsiness, my lady.
Are you all right?
I'm fine, Father.
Come, I'll get your powders. Please excuse me, friends. We will have to continue this another time. Fiona, I require your assistance back at the castle.
I don't mean to trouble everyone.
I shall send word to the Inquisition. We will conclude this business at a later date.
Here we see the first instance of Felix's illness, which I'll have more to comment on later on as we see a bit more of it and figure out what exactly is ailing him.
Wow, aren't we secretive?
There's no telling who or what will be waiting for us in that chantry.
Come on, let's do something.
We don't need your kind here. Your Inquisition's just Templars by another name.
You'd rather bow to Tevinter than join the Inquisition.
Don't tell me you bought the Chantry's lies about how evil Tevinter is. It's just because they're ruled by mages. No one wants us to look at them and say their mages are free and the world hasn't ended.
But don't Magisters summon demons and practice human sacrifice?
The Chantry says whatever they think will scare us.
So here we see one of the most interesting dichotomies within the Dragon Age universe, where the southern regions of Thedas, like Orlais and Ferelden, and even the Free Marches to an extent, have circles of magi where they control magic and they control mages to make sure that they're brought up in a way where they don't use their magic for evil, and they're essentially controlled very tightly. Whereas in Tevinter, you've got mages being given positions of prominence and in some senses actually ruling the rest of the population.
Right, and I'm the Empress of Orlais.
We see the dichotomy within the southern regions of those who think that mages should be more free and those who think that the magi, the circle of magi is very essential, but seeing Fereldans or Orlesians interact with the Tevinters is always really interesting, in that Tevinters see the idea of restricting mages as being quite foreign, and so within this quest we get to see several instances of that distinction.
What does the Magister have against you?
He does not like to be reminded of what mages can become. He says all Tranquil must leave Redcliffe, but who would take us in?
How long have the Tevinters been here?
Magister Alexius arrived at nightfall, 2 days after we retreated from the Temple of Sacred Ashes. He forced anyone without magic out of the castle, save those he required to serve him. Even the Arl was sent away.
Farewell, then.
One moment. You are a member of the Inquisition, are you not? I am an alchemist. You must require potions. If the Magister will not have me here, perhaps I can offer my services.
We would be delighted to have you working for the Inquisition.
Thank you. While one lives, it is good to believe there is still a use for one's talents.
And so here we do get to see some portion of gameplay. Just as a note, I will be cutting out some sections of combat unless I am in the midst of some other commentary, or if I feel that particular section of combat is relevant for some gameplay reason that I want to make a statement about. Otherwise, I will be cutting out some portions of combat and maybe even some portions of exploration, again, unless I feel that they're particularly relevant.
Inquisition, huh? I wish to holy Andraste you'd gotten here sooner. These Tevinters make my shoulder blades itch.
You're not happy with this new alliance?
Something's not right about that lot. They're not like us. Magic or no, I'd rather count myself among decent folk than stand with Magisters.
Who are you?
Name's Tolwyn, formerly of the Circle of Magi in Hosberg. Lived my whole life there, since I was 10 years old and came into my magic. 3 meals a day, quality education, a roof over my head. If you're not summoning demons, a mage tower's a fine place to be.
If you were happy in the Circle, why are you here with the rebels?
We're all rebels now. The vote sorted them.
I always thought it was a really interesting revelation that there would be certain mages who don't agree with the idea of not having the Circle of Magi, that there would be certain mages who actually appreciated having a place where they are protected from the sometimes superstitious and hostile and violent non-magic users of Thedas. It throws a wrench into the simple black and white narrative of mages want to be free and the Chantry wants them to be controlled, when you have mages who say, no, I actually agree, we are dangerous, we do have too much power, we could succumb to the temptations of demons, and the Chantry and the Templars and the Circle of Magi are actually a good thing. And we see here a character who voices that exact opinion, and also, going back to the dichotomy between the southern regions and the Tevinter Imperium, we have a character who says, no, I'd rather stand with decent folks than with the Tevinter Magisters because they take magic too far and they allow mages to have too much freedom. So it's a good example of the BioWare writers knowing how to subvert your expectations within a conflict that they've set up in earlier games in the series that seems black and white when really it's not.
You're certain?
I don't know.
One of the more impressive moments for me the first time I played Dragon Age Inquisition was seeing the village of Redcliffe. If you played Dragon Age Origins, you have that comparison point, and the way that it's expanded in size and scope and detail is just nothing short of astonishing, really.
You're from the Inquisition. I didn't think you'd still be here. Were you really looking to ally with us?
I want this war to end without sending you back to the Circle.
There has to be a way, right? We're not what they think, all blood mages and abominations. We just want to be normal, have families, use our magic to help grow crops or something. We never wanted war. What choice did we have? Stay and be slaves? Sometimes to achieve the world one desires, one must take regrettable measures. I hope you can do something. tying ourselves to Tevinter. That can't be the right way to end this.
You don't approve of the Grand Enchanter's decision?
I was there when we voted to leave the Circle. She really seemed to care what we wanted. She was ready to rebel, but she wasn't going to unless it was the will of all mages. It's hard to believe she'd go behind our backs and sell us to the Magisters.
How long has Magister Alexius been
Lysis always struck me as a really interesting minor character, this young man, this young elf mage that we're speaking to now.
The Templars, they said.
He seems like a great way to cue into the idea that many mages are just normal people. They're not ultra powerful magic users, they're just individuals who happen to be able to tap into magic, and despite that would actually prefer to live very normal, unassuming lives.
I studied hard. I passed my harrowing. I sing the chant. But I'll be locked up for the rest of my life.
Take care of yourself.
I'll probably end up repeating this several times throughout this commentary, but I just can't state enough how well this quest encapsulates the dichotomy between the Chantry forces and those who support mages being free. It's a very simple problem to interject thematically within the story. You have these people who are able to possess tremendous power, and you interject the question of what restrictions should be placed on them. How much freedom is too much freedom? How many restrictions are too many restrictions? It's not unlike many other stories that have existed before. In other mediums, particularly in comics, X-Men is probably the closest analog of asking the question, what do you do with people who have the potential to wield tremendous power? And also, what do you do with people who are just different? And what is precaution and what is persecution? It's a timeless sort of question. But I think Dragon Age does a great job of, at times, subverting what your expectations are, and at times just distilling that simple question down to its essence and showing it in really simple ways, which I think is highly impactful.
Farewell.
Walk with the Maker.
On a technical note, this is what I was mentioning earlier when I said the scope and size and detail of Redcliffe Village is just grown to really incredible proportions within Dragon Age Inquisition, within the Frostbite 3 graphics engine. It looks absolutely stellar.
Good. You're finally here. Now help me close this, would you?
So there we get our first glimpse of Dorian. If you're wondering about the different appearance for Dorian, there are 3 different mods that I have installed for this playthrough. One is to give him the different haircut, to give him the mohawk. The second one is to remove his signature mustache from the vanilla version of Dorian, and then the third is to give him a different complexion and the 5 o'clock shadow-esque sort of stubble that he has.
Fascinating. How does that work exactly? You don't even know, do you? You just wiggle your fingers and boom. Rift closes.
Who are you?
Ah, getting ahead of myself again, I see. Dorian of House Parvus, most recently of Minrathous. How do you do? Magister Alexius was once my mentor, so my assistance should be valuable, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Are you a Magister?
All right, let's say this once. I'm a mage from Tevinter, but not a member of the Magisterium. I know Southerners use the terms interchangeably, but that only makes you sound like barbarians.
I was expecting.
Having said what we said earlier about the Tevinter Imperium and mages and the freedom of magic in Tevinter and slavery, it really bears noting that Dorian is such a great subversion of what had been established previously about the Tevinter Imperium and the Dragon Age franchise, and I think it's just a small part of what makes him such an interesting character. He's very Tevinter in many ways, but at the same time, he's not quite what you expect when you think of a Tevinter.
Someone had to warn you after all. Look, you must know there's danger. That should be obvious even without the note. Let's start with Alexius claiming the allegiance of the Mage rebels out from under you. As if by magic, yes? Which is exactly right. To reach Redcliffe, before the Inquisition, Alexius distorted time itself.
He arranged it so he could arrive here just after the Divine died.
You catch on quick.
That is fascinating if true, and almost certainly dangerous.
The rift you closed here. You saw how it twisted.
It's very interesting and worth noting that within the Dragon Age series, the notion of time travel had never been expressed or discussed, or certainly not displayed before this moment.
Is wildly unstable. It's unraveling.
It was surprisingly a very welcome addition and very well done, I think. The first time I played this, it definitely threw me off, but they handled it well, and it was an exciting addition to the lore of magic within Thedas.
When I was still his apprentice, it was pure theory. Alexius could never get it to work. What I don't understand is why he's doing it, ripping time to shreds just to gain a few hundred lackeys.
He didn't do it for them.
Took you long enough. Is he getting suspicious?
No, but I shouldn't have played the illness card. I thought he'd be fussing over me all day. My father's joined a cult, Tevinter supremacists. They call themselves Venatori. And I can tell you one thing. Whatever he's done for them, he's done it to get to you.
Why would he rearrange time and indenture the Mage Rebellion just to get to me?
They're obsessed with you. But I don't know why. Perhaps because you survived the Temple of Sacred Ashes.
You can close the rifts. Maybe there's a connection. Or they see you as a threat.
If the Venatori are behind those rifts or the breach in the sky, they're even worse than I thought.
Alexius is your father. Why are you working against him?
For the same reason Dorian works against him. I love my father, and I love my country. But this? Cults? Time magic? What he's doing now is madness. For his own sake, you have to stop him.
It would also be nice if he didn't rip a hole in time. There's already a hole in the sky.
Do you have any suggestions?
You know you're his target. Expecting the trap is the first step in turning it to your advantage. I can't stay in Redcliffe. Alexius doesn't know I'm here, and I want to keep it that way for now. But whenever you're ready to deal with him, I want to be there. I'll be in touch. Oh, and Felix, try not to get yourself killed.
There are worse things than dying, Dorian.
I think the foreshadowing in this quest of the larger plot involving the Anchor and Corypheus and what the explosion at the Enclave actually meant is quite good. I think it does a good job of building up the idea of Corypheus as the Elder One, as a very ominous antagonist. And although his potential is quite high and maybe he doesn't quite live up to that potential as an antagonist throughout the game, I think when he's being foreshadowed, he's actually at his best, as we see during this quest.
You think they're right? Alexius is setting a trap for us.
Ugh, a Magister trap. I bet they'll be talking.
We don't have the manpower to take the castle. Either we find another way in, or give up this nonsense and go and get the Templars.
Redcliffe is in the hands of a Magister. This cannot be allowed to stand.
The letter from Alexius asked for the Herald of Andraste by name. It's an obvious trap.
So, we've heard from Magister Alexius. I expected as much.
And yet some of us want to sit and do nothing.
Not this again.
Redcliffe Castle is one of the most defensible fortresses in Ferelden. It has repelled thousands of assaults. If you go in there, you'll die. And we'll lose the only means we have of closing these rifts. I won't allow it.
And if we don't even try to meet Alexius, we lose the mages and leave a hostile foreign power on our doorstep.
Even if we could assault the keep, it would be for naught. An Orlesian Inquisition's army marching into Ferelden would provoke a war. Our hands are tied.
The Magister
has outplayed.
Here's another good instance of politics at Datus playing out in a realistic way and providing an obstacle for the Inquisitor in a way that's actually pretty believable. As Josephine mentioned, you can't invade a Ferelden territory when you're perceived as being an Orlesian institution.
We cannot accept defeat now. There must be a solution.
Other than the main gate, there's got to be another way into the castle. A sewer? A watercourse? Something.
There's nothing I know of that would work.
Wait. There is a secret passage into the castle, an escape route for the family. It's too narrow for our troops, but we could send agents through.
Too risky.
This is a great callback to Dragon Age Origins. Of course, if you played
That's why we need a
DAO, you would remember that during the quest to aid the Arl of Redcliffe in Dragon Age Origins, you discover a secret passage into the Redcliffe Castle, and of course, Leliana, having worked with the Warden, the hero of Ferelden from Dragon Age Origins, she would know, in particular, about this secret passage. So, a very interesting callback to Dragon Age Origins through Leliana.
Magic without my help. So if you're going after him, I'm coming along.
The plan puts you in the most danger. We can't in good conscience order you to do this. We can still go after the Templars if you'd rather not play the bait. It's up to you.
Announce us.
The Magister's invitation was for Mistress Llewellyn and no one else. You lot wait here.
Where I go, they go.
My Lord Magister, the agents of the Inquisition have arrived.
My friend, it's so good to see you again. And your associates, of course. I'm sure we can work out some arrangement that is equitable to all parties.
Are we mages to have no voice in deciding our fate?
Fiona, you would not have turned your followers over to my care if you did not trust me with their lives.
If the Grand Enchanter wants to be part of these talks, then I welcome her as a guest of the Inquisition.
Thank you.
The Inquisition needs mages to close the breach, and I have them. So, what shall you offer in exchange?
The Inquisition has many backers among the Orlesian nobility.
The dialogue option, let's talk about time magic, also yields some pretty interesting results whenever you feel so inclined to choose that dialogue option.
She knows everything, Father.
Felix, what have you done?
You wanted me here. Why?
Do you know what you are? You walk into my stronghold with your stolen mark, a gift you don't even understand.
Note the guards in the background on the right-hand side.
You're nothing but a mistake.
If I'm a mistake, what exactly was the breach supposed to accomplish?
It was to be a triumphant moment for the Elder One. For this world.
Father, listen to yourself. Do you know what you sound like?
He sounds exactly like the sort of villainous cliché everyone expects us to be.
Dorian, I gave you a chance to be a part of this. You turned me down. The Elder One has power you would not believe. He will raise the Imperium from its own ashes.
That's who you serve? The one who killed the Divine. Is he a mage?
Soon, he will become a god. He will make the world bow to mages once more. We will rule from the Boric Ocean to the frozen seas.
You can't involve my people in this.
Alexius, this is exactly what you and I talked about never wanting to happen. Why would you support
Down goes one guard in the background.
Stop it, Father. Give up the Venatori. Let the Southern Mages fight the breach, and let's go home.
No, it's the only way, Felix. He can save you.
Save me?
There is a way. The Elder One promised, if I undo the mistake at the temple.
I'm going to die. You need to accept that.
Seize them, Venatori. The Elder One demands this woman's life.
What's actually interesting to note also as we learn more about Felix's ailment is that Corypheus, the Elder One, isn't strictly lying. He technically could reverse what's wrong with Felix, which I always thought was an interesting subtext to Alexius and his motivations. And now here we see our first glimpse of time magic.
Blood of the Elder One. Where'd they come from?
Interesting. It's probably not what Alexius intended. The rift must have moved us to what? The closest confluence of arcane energy?
The last thing I remember, we were in the castle hall.
Let's see. If we're still in the castle, it isn't. Oh, of course, it's not simply where, it's when. Alexius used the amulet as a focus. It moved us through time.
Did we go forward in time or back, and how far?
Those are excellent questions. We'll have to find out, won't we? Let's look around, see where the
Again,
ridge
the
took us.
dialogue options allow you to
Then we can figure
portray
out how
your
to get
Inquisitor in fairly distinct ways here, and I, as a mage character on this playthrough, really appreciate the ability to ask an intelligent question, as a mage character wouldn't necessarily be as shocked as a non-mage character about the introduction of time magic so much as they would be curious.
If that happened, you would never have been at the Temple of Sacred Ashes or mangled his Elder One's plan. I think your surprise in the castle hall made him reckless. He tossed us into the rift before he was ready. I countered it. The magic went wild, and here we are. Make sense?
Alexius mentioned an Elder One in the hall. Do you know who he was talking about?
Leader of the Venatori, I suspect. Some magister aspiring to godhood. It's the same old tune. Let's play with magic we don't understand. It will make us incredibly powerful. Evidently, it doesn't matter if you rip apart the fabric of time in the process.
There were others in the hall. Could they have been drawn through the rift?
I doubt it was large enough to bring the whole room through. Alexius wouldn't risk catching himself or Felix in it. They're probably still where and when we left them. In some sense, anyway.
Then let's go.
I'm right behind you. Alexius has made a dreadful mess of this place, hasn't he?
I didn't see this part of the castle.
It was covered in the tackiest carvings of wolves and dogs I'd ever seen. This is not an improvement.
Seeing the effects of the red lyrium to the interior of Redcliffe Castle is interesting, to say the least. I'm reminded of course, when you're traveling through or within Redcliffe Castle in Dragon Age Origins, obviously so much time passing. We see video games advance so much as far as graphics, and it's really interesting to see how all of Redcliffe, as I mentioned earlier, got reimagined in Dragon Age Inquisition, but in particular the interior of the castle.
Andraste blessed me, Andraste blessed me. My tears are my sins, my sins, my sins. Andraste guide me, Andraste guide me.
What did they do to you?
Andraste blessed me, Andraste blessed me.
Here we see Lysis, who we met earlier, the young elven mage that we spoke with earlier. I always found this to be a really powerful moment, in particular the first time I ever played it. Because as I said earlier, I think Lysis is really a good indication that many mages are not to be revered or feared in the way that they're necessarily portrayed by those that support them or those that oppose them. They're really just people, and as a young mage who seems hopeful that he may be able to live a quiet, relatively unassuming life, I think it really makes an impact to see what a dark future may hold for a mage like that, who's really just a regular person trying to live. That moment of seeing him reduced to that state, I think it made quite an impact, in particular the first time you see it. From a gameplay standpoint, I always find this particular section interesting because it's always the section where you figure out how you want to spec out Dorian, and in this case, for this particular playthrough, I basically just have him spec'd out as DPS, so he's a damage dealer, and considering my Inquisitor is also spec'd out for damage, we make quick work of those enemies there. But depending on how you like to build out Dorian, it's always kind of an interesting little test this quest is for how well he works within your group dynamic. As we're about to see when we come across some of our companions, I always found these scenes to be some of the most striking within Dragon Age Inquisition, but possibly within all of the Dragon Age franchise, depending on who you bring along and how they react to what's happened to them. Very, very interesting. Let's watch Blackwall here.
Andraste, have mercy. You shouldn't be here. The dead should rest in peace.
It's really me, and I'm definitely not dead, Blackwall.
I was there. I saw you fall. Alexius' spell left nothing but ash.
You skipped over too much. Look at the poor man. Alexius' spell didn't kill us. It sent us forward in time. That's how we survived.
Forward in time? I don't understand.
If we get to Alexius, we can go back to the moment we left and stop all of this from happening.
Maybe I've just gone mad. If what you say is true, then this... everything I've been through, everything about this nightmare, is a mistake.
I should have been here, but we'll set things right.
Now I know I've gone mad. To set all this right. You can't imagine the things that happened after you died. The Elder One had the Orlesian Empress killed. And in the chaos that followed, his demon army invaded. The Inquisition was crushed. Anyone who refused to convert was killed. There's nothing left out there.
Once we go back, none of that will happen.
I hope you're right.
Again, very interesting to see how your individual companions react to this dystopian, dark, possible future. All of them stay relatively close to their established character, but I always think it's interesting in particular to bring along Blackwall because Blackwall is sort of an everyman in some instances. He's kind of a normal, regular kind of guy, and seeing his loyalty to the Inquisitor in particular is interesting to me. And now we get to see Solus.
You're alive. We saw you die.
The spell Alexius cast displaced us in time. We just got here, so to speak.
Can you reverse the process? You could return and obviate the events of the last year. It may not be too late.
Dorian thinks we can go back to our own time if we find Alexius.
That makes sense. He sent you. He would be the key. This world is an abomination. It must never come to pass.
We'll have to go up. I've heard the guards saying that Alexius barricaded himself in the throne room.
Very interesting reaction from Solus. Very quick on the uptake to understand exactly what's happened with the time magic and very focused on a concrete plan on how to reverse it. Also, there isn't too much in the way of foreshadowing, but obviously for those that have played Dragon Age Inquisition and in particular the Trespasser DLC and know about the entire storyline with Solus, I think it's always interesting to kind of watch and maybe try and read into the subtext of what would actually be going through his head given the arc that occurs with his character towards the end of Dragon Age Inquisition and within Trespasser. There's not too much there. There's not too much to read into, but I always think it's interesting to see that he, out of all your companions, is really most prepared and most sober-minded in the way that he reacts to the potential future of Corypheus winning, so to speak. And we should be seeing Fiona here next. I don't know if I was ever fully satisfied with Fiona's depiction within Dragon Age Inquisition. I think I tended to prefer the way she was portrayed in Dragon Age The Calling, David Gator's novel, which was, I believe, the second Dragon Age novel, and of course David Gator, one of the lead writers for Dragon Age Inquisition and the Dragon Age franchise as a whole. I don't think it's bad how she's portrayed in Inquisition, but it doesn't quite have the same strength as her character did in Dragon Age The Calling.
I saw you disappear into the rift.
I don't understand. What's happened to you?
Red lyrium. It's a disease. The longer you're near it, eventually you become this. Then they mine your corpse for more.
Can you tell us the date? It's very important.
Harvest Mia. 942 Dragon.
942? Then we've missed an entire year.
We have to get out of here. Go back in time.
Please, stop this from happening. Alexius serves the Elder One, more powerful than the Maker. No one challenges him and lives.
I promise I will do everything in my power to set things right.
Our only hope is to find the amulet that Alexius used to send us here. If it still exists, I can use it to reopen the rift at the exact spot we left. Maybe.
Good.
I said, maybe. It might also turn us into paste.
You must try. Your spy master, Leliana. She is here. Find her. Quickly. Before the Elder One learns you're here.
And obviously, very different circumstances within Dragon Age Inquisition and within Dragon Age The Calling as far as how it relates to Fiona, but as the leader of the Rebel Mages in Dragon Age Inquisitions, I can't help but feel as though she was underutilized in some sense. She's highly acquiescent to Alexius and the Tevinter Mages, and then, as we see later on, she's sort of at the mercy of the Inquisitor and the Inquisition. It just felt like she had more to do in Dragon Age The Calling.
Are you sure you want to find out?
Here we get to see another somewhat interesting bit of combat again. If you're trying to see how Dorian fits into the group dynamic, this is probably the first time when you get to fully test that out. A lot of damage dealing I'm noticing on this particular playthrough. Again, I'm speccing out all of the mages relatively similarly, if only because I'm trying to get to those passive abilities within each talent tree, but not necessarily a bad thing as they're all able to effectively deal damage. Another side note, if you're not overly familiar with the Dragon Age franchise, or if you're just curious about the development cycle of Dragon Age Inquisition in particular, as we see the tactical camera and some of the really impressive visuals that you get when you pause combat within the TAC cam, BioWare actually talked about the Frostbite 3 engine and moving Dragon Age over to the Frostbite 3 engine from their own Aurora engine, that getting the tactical camera to work and getting combat to be able to stop at any given point was actually one of the toughest technical challenges in developing Dragon Age Inquisition. The Frostbite 3 engine had previously never had anything like that as far as being able to freeze combat at a moment's notice, and I always thought that was kind of an interesting challenge. It's kind of essential to combat in Dragon Age, so I'm glad obviously they were able to make that work, and then it's very impressive to look at as well. I mentioned the foreshadowing of Corypheus, and this is really, if you read this note, it's actually a great example of that, as he sort of tramples on the religions of old, or the predominant religions within Thedas, sort of mocking the idea of the Maker, proclaiming that he is now ascending to godhood. It really makes for, again, I think a very good antagonist, especially when he's unseen. Once he's seen, and once we get past the reveal of Corypheus, he does lose a little bit of that punch, but the build-up to Corypheus's reveal, I think, is maybe the most interesting out of everything else. I always liked this journal entry here, if you do get a chance to read some of it. It's basically a guard's journal documenting the suspicions and the perceived paranoia of Alexius, saying that he's still got several patrols up along the walls, and the guard is sort of saying, we've killed the Empress of Orlais, the Fereldans are basically killing themselves in trying to make charges against our defenses. Who is he worried about? Who is left to challenge us? And I always think that that's actually kind of interesting if you think about the broader universe of Thedas, and if you think about things like the Eveneris or the Titans or Mythal / Flemeth. If you think about these other very imposing figures or sources of power within Thedas, it's always kind of interesting to me when I read that guard journal, because I'm thinking that Alexius and or Corypheus are actually quite aware of major powers and other people that would have challenged them in the absence of the Inquisition, in the absence of a strong, intact Orlesian Empire. There would still be other forces out there that could potentially challenge Corypheus, and I always thought of that guard journal as being kind of a key into those other forces still being at play. So here we see an instance of torture, essentially. The Venatori are torturing one of the Chantry mothers as Alexius's and Corypheus's forces continue to basically destroy what's left of the Chantry. And you heard him mocking her just before you get into the room. And there we hear Blackwell. You couldn't quite hear him as the combat sounds were still going. He says, "Oh, mother, where was your maker when you needed him most?"
Lavella knew of the sacrifice at the temple.
Never.
And we're coming up here on one of the best scenes, in my opinion, in the entire game here. We're going to see Leliana in this dark future.
Talk! The Elder One demands answers.
He'll get used to disappointment. I will die first. Or you will. You're alive.
You're safe now.
Forget safe. If you came back from the dead, you need to do better than safe. You need to end this. Do you have weapons? Good. The Magister's probably in his chambers.
You aren't curious how we got here?
No.
Alexius sent us into the future. This, his victory, his Elder One, it was never meant to be.
I need to find Alexius and reverse the spell.
If we can get back to our present time, we can prevent this future from ever happening.
And mages always wonder why people fear them. No one should have this power.
It's dangerous and unpredictable. Before the breach, nothing we did.
Enough. This is all pretend to you. Some future you hope will never exist. I suffered. The whole world suffered. It was real.
In particular, if you've played Dragon Age Origins
What happened while
and seen Leliana through 3 different games.
I'm just asking for information.
No, you're talking to fill silence. Nothing happened that you want to hear.
In particular, to see her development through 3 different games and then to see her in this dark future is particularly shocking and disturbing and kind of gut-wrenching. Her character in Dragon Age Origins is very, very optimistic. I would never call her naive, but she definitely has a brighter outlook on the potential future. And she's a very pleasant character in many ways, and we sort of see her transition through Dragon Age 2, and in particular in Dragon Age Inquisition as the Spy Master, where she becomes harder and more cynical and more jaded. But even that is nothing compared to just how hardened she is in this potential future, having been subjected to this kind of torture, and her appearance in particular is pretty shocking. And there's actually one particular journal entry that you find later on that kind of gives you a clue as to why she looks the way she does and how it actually relates to Felix's illness, but we'll get to that later on.
The Magister needs more power for his rituals.
I also do think it's interesting that this is really one of the only sections in which Leliana is a part of your party, so to speak, even if it's only temporary outside of Dragon Age Origins. Obviously, she's a huge fan favorite, and so a lot of people would have loved to have seen her as a permanent party member. And here we see another scene of just how savage, really, that the Tevinters can be, or not Tevinters, but in particular the Venatori. with human sacrifices to raise more demons.
The breach, it's...
Everywhere. The veil is shattered. There is no boundary now between the world and the Fade.
To me, the Fade has always been one of the most interesting aspects of the Dragon Age lore and universe, and to kind of see it spilling into the real world here is actually very, very unique and an interesting sight to see. That is in particular an incredible visual of that giant statue head just kind of floating in the sky there.
Was an act of courage. He knew there was no other way to resist. He resisted that demon to the last.
A very interesting moment and very, very easy to miss there as it happens very quickly. Connor, the son of Arl Eamon, who we encountered in the first game in Dragon Age Origins as a boy, and he's now grown up here into an adolescent age, young man who is a mage. I guess we see him there sacrificing himself, and Dorian makes allusion to the fact that he was potentially about to be overcome by a demon and possessed, and so he did that as an act of sacrifice and bravery. Very easy to miss. I'm surprised that, considering he was a character of some note, at least in the first game, that they did not add more to that scene and didn't actually make it a proper cutscene. It's just kind of a quick little line of dialogue that you see there. And it's actually something that a lot of players aren't even quite sure about. They have questions following it, whether or not that was actually Connor. And to me, it seems like something that maybe didn't get the time that they would have wanted due to the development cycle or not having enough resources, etc. And then here we see a very important journal entry from Alexius here, noting that that Felix's caravan was attacked by the Darkspawn. And so we now know then, based on this, that Felix's illness is actually that he has been corrupted by the Darkspawn taint, which infects the person's blood and leads to them suffering a very slow and often painful death.
What became of Felix? Do you know?
Yes, I know.
And you're not going to tell me?
You'll find out soon enough.
What's even more interesting is hearing Leliana's reluctance to talk about it, because as we'll see even further down the line here, there's some relation there. Also, I think this little moment here is interesting. That's a Grey Warden. That is Grey Warden armor, and that's a Grey Warden lying there on the ground. That could be taken a number of different ways. Of course, the Grey Wardens may have been trying to stop Alexius and stop Corypheus during this dark future, but based on some of the events in Dragon Age Inquisition that we see later on, perhaps they weren't necessarily just there to try and stop him. Perhaps they were there for other reasons. So I always thought that instance of seeing the Grey Warden lying there on the ground is actually something that I've never noticed before, and I thought that was a small little interesting clue into perhaps other plot lines that we see later on.
The main hall is that way. I'm sure that's where Alexius is hiding.
Breath. Where did Alexius find this? How did he even move it here?
Can we open it?
Perhaps. But it looks quite strong. How desperate and paranoid must he be? His servants must have a way through. He has to eat. Let's look around. What in Andraste's name is that? Hold on to it. I want to look at it later.
I always thought that this particular instance was very interesting in noting the way that Dorian reacts to this door. Of course, it's very much like the doors that you unlock in the Forbidden Oasis by collecting shards. In this case, it's opened by red lyrium shards. It seems when Dorian says, where did Alexius get a hold of one of these, he's very much aware of those magical doors within the Forbidden Oasis. I always thought that was kind of interesting. And then just to make a comment about gameplay in this mission, in this quest, I've always felt somewhat conflicted about this particular portion of the quest. I like the fact that they tried to give you some additional obstacle before marching in to face Alexius, but this section has always struck me as being slightly repetitive. Purely from a gameplay standpoint, it doesn't detract at all from the story or the characters in this quest, but I always thought that from a gameplay standpoint, having to essentially clear 5 different rooms to get 5 different shards to open the door kind of breaks the pacing a little bit. The Dragon Age Inquisition combat I do find rewarding and I do find fun, but just from a pacing standpoint on the story, it definitely feels like a clear instance of needing more gameplay content to be stretched out, and that priority taking precedence over good storytelling pacing. So we see here in that codex entry that Felix is infected with the blight, and that somehow Leliana is resistant to that, and that they've been taking skin and blood samples from her, which is probably part of the reason why she looks the way that she does, because they've been taking skin samples from her to help treat Felix. So a very interesting bit of lore information that we get there, particularly considering the fact that Leliana is not a Grey Warden, although it seems certainly that she could be, given that she seems to have some sort of natural resistance to the blight and to the darkspawn infection. I also think it's possible that that may come into play in future Dragon Age games, as we know it's been hinted at that your character from Dragon Age Origins, the Warden or the hero of Herald, is off somewhere trying to find a permanent cure for the darkspawn corruption that ultimately affects all Grey Wardens towards the end of their life. I imagine Fiona's resistance may come into play in future Dragon Age games also, but another interesting note on that front is Leliana also apparently has some sort of unusual resistance to the blight.
Let's head back to the main hall. I think I know how we'll open that door.
So now that we've got all of the shard pieces, we can get through to Alexius, get past his very powerful, very complicated magical door. Again, not my favorite part of this quest, having to go and hunt down each of the shard pieces. But again, I do generally find the combat in Dragon Age Inquisition to be interesting, and now that we're towards the end of this quest here, we get a very satisfying payoff in some of the best cinematics in the entire game, in my opinion.
Alexius, it's time to answer for your crimes.
And here you are, finally. I knew you would appear again. Not that it would be now, but I knew I hadn't destroyed you. My final failure.
Was it worth it? Everything you did to the world, to yourself.
It doesn't matter now. All we can do is wait for the end.
It does matter. I will undo this.
How many times have I tried? The past cannot be undone. All that I fought for, all that I betrayed, and what have I wrought? Ruin and death, there is nothing else. The Elder One comes for me, for you, for us all.
Notice Leliana with a quickness. Super stealthy.
Maker's breath, Alexius, what have you done?
He would have died, Dorian. I saved him. Please, don't hurt my son. I'll do anything you ask.
Leliana, let Felix go. He's innocent.
No one is innocent.
And again, just further driving home the point of just how hard Leliana becomes in this dark future. Ruthless. And now we get the fight against Alexius, which is interesting as far as, I guess if you want to call it a boss fight. Not the most challenging, but once he starts to open up rifts, it does become slightly more multifaceted. Otherwise, a fairly quick fight that I think we'll go ahead and watch here.
Over for the mighty Inquisition! Assassin! This time!
Again, not the most unique of boss fights in the way that Alexius kind of gets the impenetrable shield while you're forced to deal with minions, and then once they're dispatched, we can proceed to attacking him directly. But not bad. It does add an element of challenge to it, and it makes facing him and ultimately defeating him a little more satisfying in that you have to go through a few different cycles or waves of enemies. And down goes Alexius.
He wanted to die, didn't he? All those lies he told himself, the justifications. He lost Felix long ago. Didn't even notice. Oh, Alexius.
I know you cared for him.
Once he was a man to whom I compared all others. Sad, isn't it? This is the same amulet he used before. I think it's the same one we made in Minrathous. That's a relief. Give me an hour to work out the
It's interesting. It's an interesting moment for Dorian to kind of see him confront and defeat one of his mentors, and you kind of get the notion that he's being forced to grow in this instance as he watches a man that he once looked up to fall so far. And of course, very interesting to note that of course we're in the alternate future, so once they return to the proper timeline, Alexius is in fact still alive.
We'll hold the outer door. When they get past us, it'll be your turn.
No, I won't let you commit suicide.
Look at us. We're already dead. The only way we live is if this day never comes.
A very harrowing moment, even if it is an alternate timeline, to see your companions
as much time as I have arrows.
Say, and what a great line by Leliana, you have as much time as I have arrows. What a great moment. Again, even if it is alternate universe, you know they're not really dying still, to see them volunteer to face the impossible in order to buy you time for Dorian to complete this spell.
I am shielded by flame. Andraste, guide me. Maker, take me to your side.
One of my favorite moments in the entire series, watching Leliana fight till the absolute last moment. Look at her go. Absolutely one of the best moments in the series, in my opinion. Tragic though it is, man, what a badass character Leliana is in this scene.
You'll have to do better than that.
You failed, Alexius. How forgiving is your Elder One?
You won.
I will say, it's almost universal praise for this quest and for BioWare and Dragon Age. But I will say, that line, "you've won," is one of the few instances of really bad voice acting in a BioWare game in a key moment.
Everyone dies.
And then actually a great line there from Felix, "everyone dies." You see some occasional bad voice acting in BioWare games and side quests, one of the only times when you see really bad voice acting in a main quest.
glad that's over with.
And of course, here we see the Ferelden army coming in, and we get to see Queen Enora. In this particular playthrough, I don't have Alistair as king, so actually in this particular...
When I granted your mage's sanctuary, I thought it was understood that they would not force my people from their homes.
Your Majesty, let me assure you, we never intended any of this.
Your intentions cease to matter
In this
when my
particular
people
world
respect
state, I actually had the hero of Ferelden as king consort ruling with Enora, but of course, the hero of Ferelden ultimately leaves the Ferelden court to pursue a cure for the calling for the Darkspawn corruption. And so we see Enora 10 years on down the road from Dragon Age Origins, ruling alone in Ferelden.
And what are the terms of this arrangement?
Hopefully better than what Alexius gave you. The Inquisition is better than that, yes?
They have lost all possible supporters. The Inquisition is their only remaining chance for freedom.
No one fights well for their captors.
It seems we have little choice but to accept whatever you offer.
We would be honored to have you fight as allies at the Inquisition's side.
A generous offer, but will the rest of the Inquisition honor it?
The breach threatens all of Thedas. We cannot afford to be divided now. We can't fight it without you. Any chance of success requires your full support.
Whether you accept the Inquisition's alliance or not, you will leave my kingdom.
I will say in instances where Alistair is king, this scene becomes so much more impactful. Especially if you've read Dragon Age The Calling, you actually understand that although Alistair doesn't know this, Fiona is actually his mother. And even in this scene, he still doesn't know that. And so you have this instance where Alistair is kicking the mages out of Ferelden, and Fiona's reaction is very subtle but very telling if you know the history.
It's not a matter for debate. There will be abominations among the mages, and we must be prepared.
If we rescind the offer of an alliance, it makes the Inquisition appear incompetent at best, tyrannical at worst.
What were you thinking, turning mages loose with no oversight? The veil is torn open.
We're not monsters. We can control ourselves without any outside help.
This is not an issue of self-control. Even the strongest mages can be overcome by demons in conditions like these.
Enough arguing. None of us were there. We cannot afford to second-guess our people. The sole point of the Herald's mission was to gain the mage's aid, and that was accomplished.
The voice of pragmatism speaks. And here I was, just starting to enjoy the circular arguments.
Closing the breach is all that matters.
I got a taste of the consequences if we fail. Let's make sure we don't.
We will not fail.
We should look into the things you saw in this dark future. The assassination of Empress Celine.
And seeing Leliana in her real state again just drives home the point of how shocking it is to see her after the effects of the torture.
One battle at a time. It's going to take time to organize our troops and the mage recruits. Let's take this to the war room. Join us. None of this means anything without your mark, after all.
Of course.
Meet us there when you're ready.
I'll skip the War Council, but I would like to see this breach up close, if you don't mind.
Then you're staying?
Oh, didn't I mention? The South is so charming and rustic. I adore it to little pieces.
looking at these dialogue options, I don't know if there's ever been an instance where I didn't keep Dorian on. He's actually one of my favorite characters. I think one of the most unique characters in that he brings a distinct attitude towards the magic and being a mage, and he also subverts a lot of expectations and tropes that have been established about Tevinter culture.
Not everything from Tevinter is terrible. Some of us have fought for eons against this sort of madness. It's my duty to stand with you. That future will not come to pass.
There's no one I'd rather be stranded in time with, future or present.
Excellent choice. But let's not get stranded again anytime soon, yes?
I'll begin preparations to march on the summit. Make her willing, the mages will be enough to grant us victory.
And so there you have it, In Hushed Whispers, again, one of my favorite quests, not just in Dragon Age Inquisition, but really in the entire Dragon Age franchise. It's one of the most memorable quests. It's one of the ones that made the biggest impact on me when I first played it, and it's one of the ones that I keep coming back to and keep thinking of and keep holding up as a great example of BioWare's storytelling and really epic moments within the franchise. So I hope you like this. If you have any thoughts or suggestions on commentaries that I could do in the future, hit that comment box down below. And as always, thanks for watching. Maseranis, and until next time.